taking you towards a critical tradition that I'm going to, in a sense, bring them together. So, talking about critical applied linguistics, it's also important to think about some of the roots and branches of it. The work of Marxism, the Frankfurt School are very important. They give us a sense of classrooms being infused with inequalities, so looking at issues of social justice, class and economic exploitation as affecting the ways in which students meet and interact in the classroom. These are very much part of the influence of Marx, and you see words like language is commodity. There's entire journals now and books. Language is commodity. This, and again, has the kind of intersections of Marx's work. Alienation, ideas such as language as a mode of production. And I'll give an example of that is I did some work on call centers, which is a fascinating area of sociolinguistic research, looking at how people are trained to think of and isolating elements of language for the purpose of selling things. So when you get that phone call, "Hi, how are you, Mr. Smith?" And you know someone is calling you from maybe in Bangalore, who knows where. But this whole idea of using language as an aspect or a dimension aligned with forms of production. So again, these ways of thinking of language and commodity are very much influenced by Marx, as well as another area that's interesting is recent work on the internationalization of universities and the movement of universities towards becoming private businesses and these kind of autocultures. So these have these roots. Looking at Foucault is another really important person. I heard someone say, "Oh my God, I can't wait to be done with Foucault." Because it's difficult to read. I certainly understand. But Foucault has a really interesting idea with this couplet of power and knowledge. So this idea of power not just in the police or in the army, it's in the construction of fields of knowledge. And when you think about what ways are we forced to write, who gets to speak for what counts as knowledge, as a teacher, as a scientist, these were areas where Foucault's work was so important. And Foucault's work saying that in many ways we're spoken by the languages and discourses we learn. This idea of questioning the amount of autonomy. How rational are we? How much are we shaped by our environment and what capacities we have for agency? So Foucault's really important. Derrida helps us think about what are the limits of language? What are its weaknesses? What are its indeterminacies? To what extent does language not represent the world as mediated? So Derrida's work. Bourdieu is so important, I know, in Bonnie Norton's work, and actually Andrew's work too. So Bourdieu gives us this sense of thinking about, in education, the kinds of cultures of learning and reading and storytelling. To what extent does the home culture and the minority language culture match the dominant culture of the school? So thinking about these areas of how speaking a certain way, writing a certain way is essential, or is at the crux of how teachers recognize achievement or success and employers. So this whole idea of thinking of the micropolitics of language, the Bourdieu, and how it relates again to the reproduction of certain kinds of hierarchies of power. Bourdieu is so important for this. Birmingham School of Cultural Studies. I'll go quickly through this, so I might be too long. So Bakhtin talks about all the different voices and languages around words, the struggle over meaning. The Birmingham School, when I was so interested how they looked at everyday popular culture, is not something that debases education, but something that teachers need to work with. And when you think about how do we deal with kids and their video games, kids and their popular culture, the Birmingham School, Stuart Hall Raymond Williams, helps us start to think about the way in which we utilize students and kids' engagement with comics, with video, with computers as a source of opening up critical engagement with the world. Okay, and Freire, of course, is one of the most important people in critical pedagogy, reading the word and the world look at the everyday experience in language and making connections to broad relationships of power. I had Roger Simon as a professor, which was a wonderful experience at OISE. In other areas of critical work that are important are feminist research, post-colonial theory, and queer theory. Judith Butler's work is also related to language. So it talks about how identities, in a sense, are an effect of language practices. They don't pre-exist expression, they evolve through the reiteration and the performance of roles, and her idea of performativity. Okay, let's go on.